Hey, welcome back to Doodling with Purpose. Now, episode 164. Gosh, we're blazing through, and we're jumping into some heavy stuff here. So, if this is your first episode, you might want to go back a few episodes. All right, what we're talking about now, where we left off, was verb tenses and the clues that basically what lets you know what tense the verb is in. And as a reminder, there are 4 different types of verbs in ancient Egyptian: strong verbs, doubling verbs, weak verbs, and extra weak verbs. And in the case of the infinitive form, your clue is that the weak verbs and the extra weak verbs get an extra T at the end. That's your infinitive verb clue. So today, we're going to continue talking about participle verbs, which are a very unique type of verb because they don't exist in the English language. Well, we kind of have a version of it. So a participle is essentially a verb that is treated as a noun or an adverb. There is a relative form, which is the adverb, the participle, the noun, and the future tense, which is a noun that may happen. So a participle in English, we have words like a listener, a lover, a lookout, a giver. Well, you don't have those words in Egyptian. Instead, you have one who listens. The verb to listen becomes a noun. Or for lover, it would become one who loves. The verb to love now becoming one who loves, one who sees, or one who gives. So you're taking that verb and turning it into a noun instead of putting an ER at the end of a noun like you would in English. Listener, instead, one who listens. All right, so that's what a participle is. It's essentially the ER version for Egyptian. So we talked about the present, the present tense participle, if you will, and how to recognize that everything doubles but strong. Well, in addition to the participle, the standard participle, that's a verb as a noun, we actually also have a past tense participle. Now, it behaves exactly the same way, and if you understand the concept of a participle, the past participle is not that difficult to make the jump to. So essentially remembering that if we look at our basic verbs, verbs mean to hear, to see, to love, to give in the present tense. So the past participle version of that verb makes the verb act as a noun. So if we look at the verb to see, ma'ah, as a participle, because doubling verbs don't double in the participle, it changes from to see to one who sees. So it's the same verb, it just takes on a different meaning, and it's now describing the subject, if you will, of the sentence. So a past participle then becomes, instead of one who hears, it's one who heard, one who saw, one who loved, one who gave. So you're putting the verb into past tense, but still including the noun aspect. So let's look at all the forms. First, the strong verbs. So sijim, to hear. So of course, the past participle of it is going to be one who heard. So noting there is no change. There's no change just to strong verbs. For doubling verbs, so here again we see ma'ah, to see, well, they don't double. So ma'ah should be spelled, if you will, like you see in the red at the bottom right. But in the past participle, you don't double doubling verbs. It's one of the only times doubling verbs are not doubled. So that is a clue that you are in the past participle if you see a doubling verb not doubled. If you see a weak verb, well, this is another one of those tricky ones because there's really no change to weak verbs. It's just mer to love, mer to love. Much like in the infinitive, how only weak and extra weak, not every form of verb has a difference. So here in the past participle, the extra weak verb does have a slight change, and that's that, well, it keeps the R. There's some forms that lose an R at the beginning of an extra weak verb. But in this case, you keep it, but otherwise no change. All right, I know what you're saying. You're like, wait a minute, really the only significant change there was that doubling verbs don't double. All of the other tenses are, that's kind of hard to keep track of. If there's no change, how am I supposed to know? Well, for that, you have to sort of look at the participle and the past participle as part of the same family and look at them together. So let's do that. Knowing that the past participle, there's no change to strong verb, doubling verbs don't double, no change to weak verbs, and no change to extra weak verbs, although they do keep the R. So if you put it right next to the participle, well, right away we notice one thing: strong verbs are exactly the same. But now we see that Doubling verbs don't double. Weak verbs don't double, do double, don't double. Oh, there you go. There's the pattern. Every verb in a participle doubles, except strong. Every verb in past participle doesn't double, except strong. So nothing doubles. That tends to be the way to know you're in a participle. No doubling at all, there you are, past. Everything doubling, you're in the regular participle. Except, of course, as I said, for strong verbs. And this is just one of those tough things about ancient Egyptian. I know, one of the tough things, right? Kind of like memorize 600 drawings. Strong verbs in past and regular participle have no change. They're the same exact thing. So you can't tell just based on a strong verb. You really need a doubling verb or a weak or an extra weak to understand if you're in the past participle or the regular participle. A strong verb just isn't enough of a clue. But that's why we have different verb forms, and hopefully within the paragraph you're reading, there will be multiple verbs, and you'll be able to find the verbs in the right tense that have the sign in them that tells you what tense you're in. So we can now go ahead and and we can go ahead and add past participle to our list, noting that nothing doubles, and you keep the R in extra weak. That's kind of your clue, if you will, that you were in the past participle form. And of course, I also always like to notice that participle and past participle have no difference in the strong form. So your homework is to write this sheet out. Pause this, and this should be the sheet that you're keeping to study from this week. We'll continue right where we left off. We'll go in next week, right where we left off. That's what I'm trying to say. Thanks for being part of the class. Thanks for sharing, liking, and any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll see you next week for more doodling with purpose.